Challenges. This is the score generator video guide. I'm just going to do a top level fly through because these three things, a digital diagnostic, an expert report, and a live webinar, are incredibly powerful for creating context. So while you've got a layer of content, these three things come together to provide context, which is really about building the relevance and understanding and insight around the problems that your prospects have. The more relevant we can be to the problems that they have, the more engagement we're going to create. The reason a scorecard is important is because the old sign up for great deals or sign up for my newsletter just doesn't work or doesn't inspire them to be able to provide enough content. So we've been doing a lot of stuff with our influence scorecards where people provide us with a lead. They answer a whole series of questions. We give them a specific report on their strengths and weaknesses. Now, straight away, just that level of insight is already shortcutting what it would take a salesperson hours to get to. Can happen in just a few minutes. So we're being incredibly effective. Not to mention the customized report that scoreapp.com can help you create. So if someone scores really high in a category, you can send them content in your report that is relevant for scoring high. If they score low, the content is different. So it's more relevant when they're actually reading it. This hyper relevance is just amazing. This creates data-rich leads, and we can segment those leads, which is incredibly powerful. We can then run different ads on Facebook to people with different scores. We can send different emails to people with different scores based on our automation. That comes a little bit later. But for now, we want to get the questions right. And of course, it provides all of the metrics that we need. So if you've already got the question ready to go, you can go to scoreapp.com and just get set up. And you'll see the pricing and the features, the info. Just go down that rabbit hole and make it happen. Before you do that, if you haven't already done it, make sure you've done the LAPS scorecard. And specifically, I want you to remember, or as you're going through it, experience how you feel about each of the questions. Are they useful? Are they not useful? And how you feel about your answer to each of those questions. So here's how I go about building the questions and how I recommend you do too. So I'm just going to exit the screen. Oops, exit the screen. I'm going to go here. And you'll see in our LAPS value foundation for each step in your method, I've gone through and I've created a whole series of what are the mistakes that people make, and I've taken that all the way through to the consequences, the tips, the objections, some proof, the prize, product features that relate to that, and some key maxims, which you really should do too. And then I've also got, just here, you have access to this as well. This is the LAPS unlocked scorecard. So you can mess around with this. This is just so you can see exactly how I built it. So you can change it all up for yourself. There's the two tabs down the bottom. You can see how that works. This is yours to destroy. So I've just gone full screen. I shouldn't have. Let me just fix that there. Okay. So notice how the mistakes. Now, this is what is drilling straight to the problem and what I would recommend, and I've got content around it, etc., etc. So it links to my entire value proposition. One of the mistakes, and I do this first, thinking they don't need a database. So then what I'm going to do, in the leads category of my quiz, I'm going to ask a question like, I have a CRM database like HubSpot, Infusionsoft. Yes, no, maybe. Right, where they can go yes, no, or sort of, I've called it. Right, so that gives me the answer as to whether or not they need a database. Terrible at getting referrals. I'm great at getting referrals from my existing customers. Notice how I've created the score in the personal, in the first person. I'd have this, I don't have that. I'm good at this, I'm not good at that. I'd recommend that as well because it internalizes it. Their marketing message is vague. And I've got a whole bunch of stuff down here that kind of helps give me an insight around that. My multi-step marketing funnel. I use video in my marketing because not running ads and not using video is all part of the mistakes that they're making. Does that make sense? So the importance is that each and every one of these questions is intimately and prioritized connected to the value foundation, which has consequences, which I can solve, which has a primary goal and an outcome, and all of my product features line up to it. So as people are reading this and they're like, wow, this is really relevant, what they're going to see as they continue to go into the rabbit hole is that everything I offer in our value stack helps them take these scores from poor to high. So that's really important. So key exercise number 1, go through and fill in the value foundation. You should have already done this if you're watching this video, and then flip it around and start coming up with questions, right? Different ways, 2 or 3 ways to answer, to ask a question that would lead back to this database question or this referrals question, or like obviously whatever it is for you, right? Okay, so once you've gone through and done all that, you then want to go through, I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about scoring and the weighting a little bit later, right? Let's go back to my keynote presentation here. So once you've got the questions, I now want you to go through and I want you to run this stress test on all of the questions. The key principles is less is more. We're looking to create potent questions here. 20% of your questions will yield 80% of the results. So I recommend getting like a list of about 60 questions, and then we want to cull it right down to maybe 20, maybe 40, depending on how sophisticated it is. If it's 40, you want to start with 80. Not all questions are created equal. As you're going to see, there's different weightings of yes, no, maybe, weighted 0, 1, 2, 3. And your questions must be closed questions. So you can't ask someone how you're feeling today, etc. So some of the prerequisites, you got to be clear on your niche, clear on your ideal customer's profile, clear on their top 5 problems, clear on your top 5 solutions, clear on the ultimate outcome or the prize that they're seeking, clear on your methodology for getting them there. For each step in that method, the top 5 things, the mistakes your prospects are missing or getting wrong, or the mistakes they're making. And for each step in the method, the top 5 ways you solve that problem. You've got to be clear on that stack, because we're going to take all that, as we just demonstrated, and put it into the questionnaire, so the questionnaire leads straight to your value proposition. So it's really important to take the time, once you've got these 50, 60, 70 questions, ponder each question, and each question against every other question. It's a bit of a process. Red wine helps. First, you want to remove any kind of double ups. Can you cut, combine, or convert? So a cut basically just means that the question doesn't really add anything. You've already got a number of different ways of getting to the same conclusion, and it gets to the point where that question is just overkill, or it's just a different question worded in a different way. If you can get rid of it and still do the diagnostic, you still get the X-ray, get rid of it. Less is more. The second is combine. Can you combine this question with another question to create less questions, but you're still getting the same outcome? So for example, one question might be, do you have formalized company values, as you can see on the screen here? The second question might be, does everyone on your team share those values? You could just mush them together. Do you have formalized company values shared by all? Yes, no, maybe, right? So you kind of get it into one question. So you want to go through all of your questions. Can you just get rid of any of them? Can you mush a couple of them together? And could you convert any of them to be more punchy and succinct? A journalist once taught me that if you can say the same sentence with less words, use less words. If you can say the same paragraph and retain its meaning with less sentences, use less sentences. Page with less paragraphs, use less paragraphs. So we want to get as punchy as possible. So do you sometimes wonder whether you're spending enough time with your children? Could become, do you spend enough time with your kids? Bang, get to the point. And always be selling. So for each one of the questions, you want to be thinking, how would knowing the answer to this question help you influence the prospect to buy? So if I know someone's not using video in their marketing, that unlocks a whole value proposition that I can then offer them precisely. I know they're not going to be getting the kind of results they could be getting if they were. So me knowing the answer to that question helps me influence them, and I can articulate it. So you need to have an argument why having the answer for every single question is going to help you influence them to buy your stuff so you can fix their problems. Does the question suggest a problem you can solve? So if you say, no, I don't have video, I'm not using video in my marketing, the simple fact that I've asked you that question implies that I can help you fix that problem, which I can and we will. Put yourselves in the shoes of the prospect and consider the best order to reveal the questions. Now, I have not done this in the quiz spreadsheet, the beta version, right? However, when I convert it up into scoreapp.com, I'm going to go through all those different categories and I'm going to put them in different order, right? Because the algorithm doesn't need it to be presented in a particular order when it goes onto score. It gets too complicated to do that on a spreadsheet though, which is just why it's all in those blocks. So you can reveal the questions in any order, which is cool. And also you want to highlight any keywords or phrases that help draw people's attention to your value proposition. So if you go back into my Excel version of the LAP scorecard, you'll see I've got some underlined, some in italic, etc. You want to do that as well. So that's a pretty simple way to be able to go through and stress test all of your questions. Now, what I need you to do is, once you've synthesized your questions, let me get rid of that. Once you've synthesized your questions, I go through and I set everything to no. And then I go through and I will rate, okay, what score do I want to give of 0, 1, 2, 3 to someone that doesn't have a database? And you can see here, I've given no a 0. Right? If you don't have a database, you don't get any score, right? So when it's out of 10, not helping you in the outcome of the score. You can see if they've said yes, it's a 2. I haven't given it a 3 because it's not rocket surgery, like having a CRM is like a ticket to the game kind of thing. As opposed to, you can see, I've said here that having a variety of digital content like blogs and videos that reliably attracts inbound leads, that's a bigger deal. So I've weighted that more than I have weighted having a CRM and database. So for no, a lot of these zeros, look at this. This no gives a 3. That's because it's a reverse question. I find myself getting bogged down in technology. The answer no to that question is actually a positive response, which is why a no response will provide a 3. And then a maybe or a sort of, you'll see I've done the same thing where most of these are 1s. Some of them are maybe sort of as a 2. I have a sales assistant that books me or my team sales and demo appointments. A sort of response is a 2. That's better than nothing, and it's better than a 1, in my opinion. I might decide I'm going to go back and tweak these later on as well. But what ends up happening is you end up with a weighting where all questions aren't created equal. Every yes, no, or maybe doesn't have to be created equal, and yet it'll still spit out a 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10 percentage. Now, you might go through and as you're playing around with this, ruin the algorithm, ruin the score, all that kind of stuff. That's fine. When you're ready, if you're ready, and you want to actually turn this into a functioning scorecard, Rena's brother actually built all this for me. So we can connect you with him and he can build it all out for you. So the idea of me giving you this is not designed to be a perfectly designed template for you to build yours where you can't screw it up. That would just be way too hard. This is designed for you to screw it up, to get the general questions, the general weighting for all of those questions, so then you can just jump straight to having it built in scoreapp.com. But if you want to turn it into a spreadsheet first to play around with it with a beta, let us know and Rena will introduce you to Jag. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you go about building a scorecard. I'll see you on the next webinar.